Love makes me treat you the way that I do. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? There's nothing too good for a girl that's so true. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? I bought you a fur coat for Christmas, a diamond ring, a Cadillac car, and everything. Love makes me treat you the way that I do. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? Greetings, peeps. Long time no see. I know. I do apologize for the lack of recent communication. I've had some illness and that I've been dealing with, as well as some technical difficulties. So I do apologize, and that's about all I know to tell you. Professors have lives too, and so we, because we have lives, we also have issues. Anyway, it's nice to be back with you for a little bit. First thing I'd like to do is to, with this vid, is to promote the composition project. So let's talk about that for a second. This whole series that I'm going to produce for you in this vid is going to be for your benefit. You will find a link on our composition, on our e-learning site in the module for composition project, and it will have all of the parameters of the project spelled out for you, and a link to a vid that can be extraordinarily beneficial to you with respect to figuring out how to begin your composition project. But one thing I want to make very, very clear, I just expect you to try this. It's not something that you have to do, an excellent job on. All I ask is that you give it a try. The whole purpose of this composition project is just to give you the opportunity to apply some of the techniques that we've learned throughout our course. So it doesn't have to be a award-winning composition. If it is, great, but it doesn't have to be anything spectacular. I do think you'll have a lot of fun with it if you allow yourself to. So watch the vid. It is very, very helpful. As far as the parameters go, your composition needs to be at least 8 measures. You can write all the way up to 16, but you only need to do 8. You're only composing a singular melodic line. No harmony, no accompaniment. That's all you need is a single melody. And I talk about this in the vid, so you'll understand what that is fully. You must use a digital music notation software. So I give you 2 links to 2 free software packages that you can use. One of those is MuseScore, and the other one is Noteflight, and you may have played around with these already. The major difference between the 2 software packages is that MuseScore is actually a software that you download to your own system, so it's resident in your computer, and the other is Noteflight, which is entirely web-based. Both of them are very easy to use, and both of them allow you to save your work as a PDF, which is what you're going to have to do in order to submit your final assignment. Now, or your final project, excuse me. Let me also stress that your final project is not due until the last day of class, which is April 26th. So you have quite a bit of time. You've got a couple weeks here to play around with it. Folks, just give it a try. You don't have to be expert composition. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to provide an award-winning composition. Just play around with it. Have some fun with it. give it a try. That's all I ask. I should mention you can compose in any key except C major or A minor, and make it easy on yourself. Like I say, watch that vid. You don't have to choose an elaborate key signature. You don't have to choose an elaborate time signature. That's not what this is about. Just give it a try. Just play around with it. And I encourage you to play with the software, because it's fun. So in addition to that vid, immediately following the end of this vid, there is a description of the final two sections of our course, which deal with minor scales. And of course, the three forms of the minor scale, which are natural, harmonic, and melodic. And then we're going to be talking about minor key signatures, in particular the relative minors, and why we call them relatives, because they share the same key signature. They look alike. And this is nothing different than what you've got in your book. It's just presented to you in a little bit of a different way. Perhaps in the form of a lecture that you might have with me if you were taking a face-to-face class. And then I'm going to briefly talk about this right now, and that is something called parallel key signatures. Now, I'm not really interested in you mastering parallel key signatures, but I wanted you to understand the difference between parallel key signatures and relative key signatures, okay? Here's the big difference. Relative key signatures share the same key signature, okay? They look alike. So think about relatives as in your own relatives. If you have brothers, sisters, moms, dads, uncles, what have you, you may resemble them. You may share family traits. You may share the same living space. Well, relative key signatures share the same key signature. So for example, the key of E major looks exactly like its relative C sharp minor. And you're going to find out about all of that and how to determine them by watching this vid, the segment that follows this. And then the final segment of our course deals with intervals. And the two types of intervals, which are melodic and harmonic, interval identification, interval construction, and the qualities of intervals. Now, the reason I bring these into this discussion is because your book sometimes presents things a little bit differently than what I would in my lectures. Also, your book operates a little bit differently. So I encourage you to watch the vid, get all the help you can. There are several online resources available to you that you can also use in addition to our online text. Remember, musictheory.net. But also on our own e-learning site, you also have the course pack, the PDF of the course pack, and you're welcome to use that as well. So you have some resources out there to help you. So let's talk briefly about the final exam. The final exam will open on Sunday, April 21st at 12 midnight. That's the way they always work, right? Our assignments open on Sundays, always at 12 a.m. The final exam will close on Friday, April 26th at 11:59 p.m. So you have the entire week to take the exam, remember, but you only have the allotted 2 hours, 120 minutes, to complete the exam. And once you've started the exam, you can't pause it and resume. You have to finish it once you start it. So give yourself some time. If you need review, take the time. That's what this week is for. The thing to not do, it would be to wait until Saturday evening to start your final exam. I realize you've got other courses, you've got a life, you've got jobs. Many of you have other exams that you're taking. I get all that, but just think about it. This is only a 2-hour block of time. And it's not going to take you the entire 2 hours, I would imagine, most of you, to take this final exam. So please, give yourself some space on either side of this week-long window. Don't wait until Saturday to take it. Do it on Friday if you want, to put it off and have that extra time to study. Wait until Friday. Just don't wait until Saturday. Because once the time expires, there's nothing I can do for you. So please, use your time wisely. Okay, so hopefully that answers some questions, and hopefully these following segments will clarify some things for you. If you've been struggling with minor scales or minor key signatures, hopefully this will clarify it, as well as for intervals. And do follow that link and watch that vid on the composition project. I think it will be greatly beneficial to you. All right, I've enjoyed getting to know each of you, especially through our emails and our online discussions. There'll be one brief final discussion topic, and I think you'll enjoy it. And then we'll just say goodbye for the summer. So again, I've enjoyed getting to know you. I hope you've enjoyed the course. And it's been a pleasure to get to communicate with many of you through email and through our online discussions. So have a great summer, folks. And hey, we'll see ya. All right, peeps, let's talk about minor scales. Now, what I'm going to show you is nothing different than what you find in your text. It's just presented to you in a little bit of a different way. And sometimes it helps to have that. If you have been struggling with understanding minor scales, maybe this will help clarify things. Another thing you can always do is to look on the website musictheory.net, because it's going to contain the same information, and it is going to present it to you in a completely different way than I'm presenting it to you. So there are, as your book indicates, 3 forms of the minor scale. They are the natural minor, harmonic minor, and melodic minor forms of the minor scale. Now, in order for us to understand minor, we kind of have to look at these forms individually. So when we look at the natural minor scale, and we were to put 8 tones up there, right now, the way those tones are presented on that staff, it sounds like this. And that's understandable because without any accidentals, that is a C major scale. We've seen this before. In order for this to become a minor scale, we have to do some things. We have to have a lowered third. So we put a flat symbol by that E natural, the 3rd degree, to lower it 1/2 step. We need a lowered 6th. So we would put a flat by that A natural, lowering it 1/2 step. And we need a lowered 7th. So that would give us a B flat instead of a B natural. Now this scale is going to have a completely different sound. Okay, so that's the natural minor scale. So I want you to sort of remember there's 3 accidentals we had to add here: an E flat, an A flat, and a B flat, or a flat symbol by the E, the A, and the B. Let's continue forward with this and look at the harmonic minor scale using this same bass. Once again, without any accidentals, that's going to be a major scale. But a harmonic minor scale has a lowered 3rd and a lowered 6th, but the 7th degree is left alone. It's raised. It has a little bit of an Eastern kind of flavor to it. And the reason we have a raised 7th in the harmonic minor is to create the leading tone with that 7th degree, that B natural, which would not be present, by the way, in the natural minor scale. Okay, and then the final form of the melodic, or excuse me, of the minor scale is the melodic minor scale. Now, it's going to look the same at first, but you'll notice it's got 7 more tones added to it, and there's a reason for that. in the melodic minor scale, you still have a lowered third, so that stays the same, but the 6th and 7th degrees this time are left alone, so they are actually raised. And then when you come down, you have a lowered 7th, a lowered 6th, and a lowered 3rd. So on the way down, the melodic minor scale sounds just like a natural minor scale. And there really is no particular rhyme or reason for doing this other than musical color. So it gives the composer a little more color to choose from with respect to the use of accidentals. So just kind of keep this in your head, because we're going to be looking at some things a little differently later on. But notice again on the ascent, it's a different type of scale. It has a raised 6th and 7th. And then on the way down, sounds just like a natural minor scale, because we lower the 7th and we lower the 6th in addition to lowering the 3rd. Okay, let's move ahead now and talk about key signatures, minor key signatures, and in specific, we're going to discuss relative minor key signatures. Why do we call them relatives? Well, because they share the same key signature. They look alike. So let's pull up a new tool. Now, we've seen this before. This is the circle of fifths, but we've only used it up to now to construct major key signatures. In this case, we're going to use it to identify and construct minor, relative minor key signatures. You can see some correlations here. For example, if you look all the way up at the top of the circle here, the noon position or midnight position, depending upon how you want to look at it, that number is 0, right? So the key of C major has no sharps, no flats. So therefore it would have no accidentals, and its relative would have no accidentals either. Let's look at this in a little bit of a different way. Here we have our circle of fifths as we've seen it already in the order of sharps and the order of flats, and we are looking specifically at the key of E major, which has 4 sharps. If we were to consider E major's relative minor, and remember, we call them relatives because they have the same key signature, we can determine a major key's relative minor by using a few simple steps. We're going to start with the letter name of the key, which in this case, the major key, is E. And we're going to count backwards 3 letters, starting with E as 1, D, C. So now we have C as our letter name of the relative minor. So if we were to go with that, we would say E major's relative is C minor, but there's a problem. What's the problem? Well, C is sharp in this key. So it's not just C minor, but C sharp minor. So think of these things as we move along. You've got to consider the key signature when you are identifying the relative. You've got to consider the accidentals in there before you can use this method of counting backwards. But honestly, in my opinion, this is much easier. Just look at this souped up circle of fifths, and you can print this up. This will be on e-learning for you to print up. You can keep it with you while you're taking your exams and doing your quizzes. I have no problem with that to help you determine what relative minor from the major you are looking at. So again, C major, there's going to be no accidentals. So you're not going to see anything in the key signature. The same is going to be true of its relative. A minor, no accidentals. Remember, we call them relatives because they share the same key signature. If we move on around the circle to the first sharp key, which with 1 sharp, G major, its relative is E minor. Continuing on, D major, 2 sharps, B minor, 2 sharps, A major, F sharp minor. Let's consider that for a second. Why is it F sharp minor? Well, because F is sharp in the key signature. Continuing on, we've already looked at this one, E major. E major's relative is C sharp minor. And B major's relative is G sharp minor. And F sharp major's relative is D sharp minor. So once again, looking at this from the standpoint of remembering the fact that we call them relatives because they share the same key signature. Okay, so let's continue on to the flat side of the circle of fifths and look at the first flat, which would be the key of F, which has only one flat in it, and its relative, D minor, which would also only have one flat because it shares the same key signature. And if we continue on, we see the same thing. B flat major's relative, G minor. E flat major's relative, C minor. A flat major's relative, F minor. D flat major's relative, B flat minor. And once again, let's recall why we are calling this B flat minor and not B minor. Because number one, in the key of D flat, D is flat. Number two, in the minor key, B is flat. So there you go. That's why. Same is true of the key of G flat major and its relative, E flat minor. In the key of G flat major, G is flat. And in the key of E flat minor, E is flat. So just again, understand this concept of the relatives and why we call them relatives, because they share the same key signature. Now, moving ahead, let's look at the relative minor key signatures with from the standpoint of a scale. Here we're looking at the key of E major, right, on top, and its relative, C sharp minor. And we're going to look at the natural form of the minor scale, the C sharp natural minor. In order for us to have this, we already know for a natural minor scale, we got to have a lowered third, a lowered sixth, and a lowered seventh. Well, we have to incorporate, for a C sharp minor scale, we've got to incorporate all of these accidentals we see in the key signature. So C has got to be sharp, D has got to be sharp, F has got to be sharp, and G has got to be sharp. And when we do this, we already get a lowered third, and we get a lowered sixth, and we get a lowered seventh. All of those things are already present by virtue of the key signature. So, in my opinion, it's much easier to construct a minor scale using a key signature rather than having to write in all those accidentals. But your book wants you to do it the hard way. Your book wants you to put in the accidentals. So this is why I strongly suggest print up this souped up circle of fifths with its relative minors already in place. And at the very least, you'll have the number of accidentals. And if you follow the order of sharps and flats, you can't go wrong. You'll be able to construct these with ease. Let's continue on, though, and look at this from another standpoint, such as the harmonic minor. We already know that the harmonic minor scale must have a raised seventh. We still need all these sharps, right? Because they're in the key signature. But now we have to indicate that raised seventh degree. And we're going to have to do that with an accidental, the sharp. Harmonic minor scales have a raised seventh degree. So this is going to sound a little different. Remember, this one has that sort of Eastern flavor to it. So the only difference, again, from the natural minor to the harmonic minor is that raised seventh. And then let's take a look at the next one, which would be the melodic minor. So we know, again, we got to have the C sharp, the F sharp, the G sharp, and the D sharp with respect to the natural minor scale. But we're going to have to do some other things to turn this into a melodic minor. Remember, the melodic minor not only has the lowered third, but it has a raised sixth and a raised seventh degree. So it's going to sound very, very different on the ascent. And then on the way down, we lower them back. Okay, so hopefully this little discourse in melodic minor and natural minor and harmonic minor scales, as well as the use of this newfangled circle of fifths, has been of help to you. I certainly hope so. As always, folks, if you have questions and need clarification of anything, shoot me an email. Okay, so let's take a look at the final topic from our textbook, which is intervals. Now, put very simply, as your book states, an interval is just simply the distance between two pitches. And when we look at the types of intervals, there are basically two types. Those are melodic intervals, which are played separately or consecutively, and harmonic, which are played together or simultaneously. Now, I realize these two terms, melodic and harmonic, we've already been exposed to in a completely different way through the minor scales, but this is not the same thing. This is different. So let's take a look at intervals from this standpoint. Here we have an interval of a fourth, and this is considered to be a melodic fourth. Now, I realize that those tones are a little bit quiet right now, but I don't want to burst anybody's eardrums either. But so a melodic fourth, again, is where you have two notes that are played separately, right? And how do we count the interval? How do we know it's a fourth? Well, we start with the bottom note and we count upwards: C, D, E, and F, giving us fourth. C, D, E, F. So that's how we get the number 4. And it's melodic, again, because they are played separately. Now, if we look at the alternative or the other form, the harmonic form, the two notes are played together. Hence the word harmony. So that would be considered a harmonic fourth. Okay, so in addition to the types of intervals, we also have something known as interval qualities. But before we get there, let's take a look at the harmonic intervals from the standpoint of all of the intervals, and there are 8 of them. Your book does go on. There are 9ths and 10ths and 11ths, but I think you can figure that part out if you just kind of pay attention to how this is going to be displayed to you. We have harmonic intervals here, all of them, all 8 of them. A perfect unison means it's the same note, right? A second, a third, a fourth, harmonic fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. Now, again, those are all harmonic intervals. I realize the tones are a little bit soft for you right now, but again, bear with me. I think you're going to get this if you just sort of pay attention. So let's talk about what are the interval qualities. There are 5 of them: perfect intervals, major intervals, minor intervals, augmented intervals, and diminished intervals. And yes, they are all different. They all have different components, although they may look alike in some ways. So let's take a look at what the perfect intervals are. The perfect intervals are the number 1, the unison, perfect 1, the fourth, the perfect fourth, the fifth, the perfect fifth, and the octave or perfect 8. So those are the perfects, 1, 4, 5, and 8. Always the perfects. Okay, let's take a look at what the major intervals are. The first one would be the second, major second. The next one would be the major third, major sixth, and the major seventh. So 1, 4, 5, and 8 are the perfects. 2, 3, 6, and 7 are the major intervals. Now, the significance between these is going to make sense when we get to this next view, which has this monstrosity. But take a look. The top staff is where we're going to talk about augmented intervals. The middle is what we've already been looking at, which are the perfect and the major intervals. And then the bottom staff, we're going to look at diminished and minor intervals. So, for example, an augmented interval. What do we have to do to make an augmented interval? We raise the top note. The word augment means to make bigger or to add to. So we are adding that accidental to make it an augmented interval. And it's sounds like that, a very disagreeable sound for some of us. And then an augmented second, right? We just take that second tone and we raise it. An augmented third. Notice how the harmonic intervals are stacked on top of each other, right? In the case of the unison, there's no way to stack, right? And in the second, if you try to stack these, they're going to run together. So your second intervals are always going to look like that. They're just sort of staggered. Everything else, though, is going to be stacked right on top of each other. So we can have an augmented fourth, an augmented fifth, an augmented sixth, augmented seventh, and of course, an augmented octave. All of those are possibilities with respect to augmenting intervals. Any interval, 1 through 8, can be augmented. Now let's take a look at the diminished intervals. There's a diminished 1, a diminished second, a diminished third, a minor second, and a minor third, a diminished fourth, a diminished fifth, and a minor sixth, and a minor seventh, and a diminished octave. Now, before we proceed, understand 2, 3, 6, and 7 can be major, they can be minor, they can be augmented, and they can be diminished. So let's understand something here. How would we diminish a minor interval? Well, we would have to lower the top note again. How would we do that? With the double flat symbol. So just make sure you understand this concept because there are rules to these intervals. Let's consider these rules for a second. Perfect intervals, 1, 4, 5, and 8, can only be perfect, augmented, or diminished. They can never be major or minor. I can't stress this enough because you can mislabel these intervals as major or minor and you would be wrong. You'll be marked wrong. So understand the perfect intervals, a first, a fourth, a fifth, or an 8, can only be perfect, augmented, or diminished. They can never be major or minor. And by the way, this is whether it's a harmonic interval or a melodic interval. It makes no difference. That's the rule. And then major intervals, 2, 3, 6, and 7, can only be major, minor, augmented, or diminished. They can never be perfect. So you can never have a perfect 2 or a perfect 3 or a perfect 6. Understand that. But you can have a major or minor 2, 3, 6, and 7, and you can have an augmented 2, 3, 6, and 7, and you can have a diminished 2, 3, 6, and 7. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I get that this is a lot to throw at you, and so I understand if it's confusing. Music is not an easy subject when it comes to things like this, so please don't stress out about it. Just do your best. And we will, you're going to do just fine. Again, as always, if you have questions, feel free to email me. We can even set up a time to meet face-to-face if that is the only way that we can get clarification for you. Another thing, again, to consider is to use the online resources that are available to you. You can always go back and review the material in your book. And also, if you check out that musictheory.net website, they have quite a bit to offer there. Okay, so that's my discussion on intervals. I'm a sentimental sap, that's all. What's the use of trying not to fall? I have no will, you made your kill, 'cause you took advantage of me. I'm just like an apple on a bough, and you're gonna shake me down somehow. So what's the use? You've cooked my goose, 'cause you took advantage of me. I'm so hot and bothered that I don't know my elbow from my ear. I suffer something awful each time you go. It's much worse when you're near. Here am I with all my bridges burned, just a babe in arms where you're concerned. So lock the doors and call me yours, 'cause you took advantage of me.